All right, this is 2.3 Indian Ocean Trade Networks. So we've already gone over the Silk Road and we talked about the Mongols. So now we're on to the blue circuit here, which is Indian Ocean trade. So much like the Silk Road, you're going to have a lot of different, whether it be goods traveling on this, but also a lot of different ideas and blendings of culture. All right, so learning objective is the same as we've had all the other times, explaining the causes and growth of networks of change throughout this era, look at what caused them and also what are the consequences. So things that we're going to look at today, this is kind of like, I guess, highlighting what direction we're going in. We're looking at the increase of the amount of trade that's going to happen, how far the trade is going, and then how the Indian Ocean actually created the growth of various states that maybe wouldn't have been as powerful without it. And we're also going to look at technological innovations that allowed this trade system to be so impactful and so monumental. Another thing we're going to look at is diasporic communities that set up in Africa for the most part, in relation to where trade is happening. But we can also see that not only are they happening in East Africa, we're also going to have Chinese merchants setting up communities throughout Southeast Asia, like Indonesia, Malaysia. And then we're also going to have a Malay community in the Indian Ocean basin. So the ones that usually get a lot of hot traffic, though, are going to be the Arab and Persian communities in East Africa. But we will get there. All of this historical development stuff is just kind of like a roadmap showing, setting the stage, contextualization, showing where we're going with it. And then we are going to finally talk about Zheng today. All right. So I'm not going to watch this with you. If you really want to go watch this, you can. I would say that Heimler's history is probably more appropriate and some of the other videos. But again, that is not to shorthand anything that the Green brothers are talking about. And their videos always have so many like fun facts and stuff in them. So today when we talk about the Indian Ocean trade routes, it is the water version of the Silk Road. It is the largest sea-based communication and exchange route at this point in history until in what unit 4 we get to the Atlantic or the Atlantic trade system, which is typically in our history called the Atlantic slave trade system because that's one of the biggest commodities exchanged, if we can call it that, people being forcibly transferred. But that is really the next big one coming. Up until that point, this is the most populated and most important sea-based trade route. So we have talked about this slide or the content on it probably looks familiar, but we talked about how goods just travel cheaper here because you can pack more into a ship, and you had mass market goods instead of just luxury goods. So there is a huge changeover in what's available. And then we've already hit on, but again, we're going to drill this point home, the monsoon winds. When people figured out what direction they blow and how it's seasonal, it made trade super reliable. We knew which way to go. It wasn't a guessing game of, are the winds going to cooperate today? It was, we know they go this direction in these months and this direction in the other months. So we can just plan our shipment routes with the monsoon winds. And it just made it very systematized and organized. You also have better shipping technology, like shipbuilding technology, that is created as a reaction to this growing network. People know that this is where money is, and you need the technology that will make it, whether it be more convenient, faster, safer, can hold more stuff. All of that applies to all these different places, creating ships that are kind of the best models for Indian Ocean trade. There's different styles of ships for different goals you have. And then you're also going to have networks of urban centers that are strung out across the ocean. Across the Silk Road, you had key trading cities that you had to get to, and they were, the big hubs. In this one, it's kind of like that, but you have to sail across some water before you land in these key places along the right. So they're just spread out across the ocean instead of across the land. It's not entirely different. But instead of dealing with a huge country that you're walking into or across, sometimes it's really broken up, or sometimes it's a lot smaller. So every time you land, maybe you're landing in a different zone and in a different country. And it does make that part of it, I would say, a little different. So you've seen the slide. This is the third time you've seen it at this point. You need to know the monsoon winds are the thing that made the Indian Ocean trade system so successful and possible, right? And you need to know that winds blow eastward in the summer and west in the winter, WW, west winter. So once they understood this, it meant trade could be increased because they'd know this is the time we have to go in the westward direction, let's say, in the winter. And so they would get lots of ships available and pack them full and make sure that that was like the time they sent the vast majority of stuff over. And then when things would go back to the summer and blow in an eastward direction, then they knew to pack all those goods up, and it gave them time to prepare. But it also meant like they could utilize that system. And once it was figured out, more and more people saw how reliable it was and how much money could be had. So more and more people joined. So if you want to watch this, it just talks about a monsoon. It's like a kind of like a super big rainy season with pretty big gusts of wind that places around the world still experience monsoon season. It's not like it magically disappeared when the trade route got unpopular. It's still around today and it still fits the patterns. All right, so this is a very similar slide to the Silk Road where it said there's powerful trading cities popping up. We saw that with the Silk Road. We used the example of like Samarkand and Kashgar. So again, we have that happening here. There's three circled on here, but the two that I think always come up are going to be Malacca, and then we're also going to have the Swahili City-States. Those are the two big ones. Not saying the port in India isn't, but it's Malacca and the Swahili City-States that you hear probably the most about. Now, when we talk about those trading cities, they kind of, quote, popped up overnight. They gained popularity and wealth because of the amount of trade that was going on. And the amount of trade that was going on was possible because of the new technology that people were either getting access to or creating as a direct result of they wanted to participate in trade and wanted to make it more successful. So, number one, we've already covered people learning about the monsoon winds, understanding how to track them. The next, improvement of sail technology. So the idea of the like lateen sail that we've mentioned before, this triangular sail like Moana has, since that's usually the reference kids understand at this point, that can catch the wind no matter what direction. But I would say, along with the lateen sail, you also have the invention of new types of ships, which are iconic. So the Chinese have the Zhang ships, which is this top one here, with I always think the sails kind of look like fish fins or tails or something. And then you have the Indian and Arab dhows down here, which hopefully you can see my mouse, that are probably, China uses these in their portion of the Indian trading system, but it's always the dhows that kind of like get the focus because I guess they're kind of seen as like faster and sleeker, and they have these holes that can hold a lot, but they're very quick. And the junks, they can hold a lot of stuff, and they're suitable for Indian Ocean trade. They're great for it, and they're created for this purpose. Um, Even if you have the chips, though, it's all about like knowing how to navigate. So the magnetic needle compass and the Astrolabe are two iconic pieces of equipment that allow sea travel to happen so much easier and more effective, and people knowing what direction they're going in, um, using the night or using the stars in the sky, but also using a magnetic compass. So they're revolutionary. Um, I would say all three of these things would be great to know in terms of looking at what made these trade systems so successful. Well, it was the development of new technology, right? The compass had been around in China, but eventually it starts kind of like leaking out to other areas due to trade and diffusion. And then so does the astrolabe. The astrolabe is typically associated with more like the Middle East. And then just new ship designs. The Dow and the Zhunk, they are seen as larger ship designs that wouldn't have been used before. And the point of them being larger was they could carry more stuff. And then, of course, the lateen sail. This one will keep coming up. It's kind of like kids usually remember Champa Rice and the lateen sail, this triangular sail that changes the game. The Dows have the lateen sails on them. So if you look at, let me go back, these pictures down here with this Dow, that's a lateen sail rigged onto it. So it's a very useful piece of technology. People have been using it for a long time. We do have it used during the Age of Discovery. Even when you have people like in our Unit 4 with the Age of Exploration happening, the lateen sail is used, but that's not like they didn't invent it. The Europeans shouldn't be credited with it, but either should the Chinese. Like the Polynesian cultures predating this had been using it for a long time as well. Um, it just becomes standard rigging on the Dow ships used in Indian Ocean trade, which kind of gains it, I guess, like mainstream popularity at the time. But it is far from the first groups of people who are using this technology. It has been used by others before them. So I think this video is interesting to watch. It talks about the lateen sail and how it was founded, but also like people still kind of mess with it today, and it's just successful. You can catch the wind no matter what direction it's blowing and use it to propel you instead of very rigid rigging where you better hope the wind is in your side and it's going the right way. This one makes you more adaptable. So when we look at the Dow versus the Zhunk, the Dow on to the left side here, it is used for sailing in pretty much just the Indian Ocean. It's not made for really long journeys, right? A lot of these places we talk about, like the Indian Ocean's big, but you're stopping from port to port to port. It's not like you're crossing an entire ocean, like going across the Pacific or Atlantic with no stopping points. You're breaking and porting at all these places, to whether it's unload goods or resupply or do business. So it's perfect for that. The Chinese junk, it's made with these large flat bottoms that can carry a ton of stuff. So again, the Dow is seen as a very fast ship with a hull that can carry stuff. And then the junk is notorious for just having an even like larger hull. And so when the Chinese are doing this stuff, they're participating in trade, but we're going to look at them more so using Indian Ocean trade systems to find new places to enroll in their tribute system. This idea of making contact with people they hadn't before and been like, hey, do you want to show reverence to China and be a part of our tribute system? We'll give you some cool stuff if you promise to, bow to us and say how much you respect us and give us cool stuff as well. And so they would go out and they would fill these junk halls with all this neat stuff that they had gathered as tribute for their emperor to bring back and talk about these new relationships they had formed. Okay, now the astrolabe. Kind of the most confusing because we don't see it. Like a compass, everyone, I would say, knows what a compass is, and it tells you what direction you're going in and what, helps you find maybe if you want to go west, you can figure it out using a compass. The astrolabe, this picture does it justice. It tries to find what latitude you're at when you're out at sea, and it uses you lining it up with certain stars in the sky. And you hold it from this loop at the top, and you have to hold it straight, and you have to align it with some certain objects in the sky depending on what direction you're going, and it would help you navigate at night. um this guy has a really cool astrolabe that he shows. I would say go give it a quick peek. It shows the technology because, like the one you can see here in the gold, it's clearly written in like Arabic text, and it shows how intricate these could be and how like some of them were super fancy and had different plates depending on, were you going to go to Malacca or are you trying to go to the Swahili City-States, or like what direction were you going? Were you going to Mecca? And you could fashion or like pull out different templates to put on your astrolabe to help you go in that specific direction. Others were just more kind of generic in terms of trying to find your placement on the globe, but it's a cool one. His voice is just very boring. He's a museum curator who doesn't have a lot of gusto in his voice, but you can tell he's very excited about the astrolabe. So if you're interested in more of how it works, go check it out. It is interesting if nothing else. Okay, you also have this video which is about maps of the world, and I love looking at old maps because it shows you how little we did or how much we did know about the world. You can only map what you know. And so some of these maps are super interesting because when the Americas haven't been, run into at this point yet, people don't know they exist, or examples of like how large of on the map Africa is. Well, when no one has actually gone down the whole coast of Africa vertically to see, Africa gets kind of weird looking. So maps are a really good indicator of what we know about the world and when we know it. So it's an interesting, I like this video. It's worth a view. I just won't play it here because the sound never carries on to mine. All right. We saw something like this very similar in the Silk Road PowerPoint. So this just is kind of showing you, are there still fine gifts here, luxury items? Yeah, ceramics, ivory, gold, of course. Excuse me. But there's also going to be other things like cotton textiles and timber and tea, things that aren't luxury goods that the common people would want. But if you're going the Silk Road, you only have a minimal amount of room, so why not pack the high priced goods versus on ships? You can pack a lot more stuff. And then also if you set lots of ships off, because it's in essence cheaper to do this, um, you can just fit a lot more stuff, which means you can diversify what you are trading. Another thing that happens though with this trade route is diffusion. So we'll talk about the diffusion of culture, but another one is the diffusion of food. The spread of rice, for example. I think this one's so interesting. It starts out in China, right? Like that's kind of the key area where we have rice. You have it in India or on the border of India up here too. But China is kind of iconically where rice begins as like a staple part of the diet. But as trade exists, whether it's the Silk Road, which you can see a little bit up top, but like the bordering nations and the Indian Ocean trade, they're bringing rice on these ships, whether it be for trade down the road, but also just to eat. And they're sharing it with others. And when people find out it can grow in new regions, it becomes a staple part of other people's diets. So, when you think of traditional, whether it be like Japanese dishes or maybe some Indian foods or place from Indonesia, people think of rice as being part of a traditional dish. It's because of diffusion and trade that it became a staple part of their diet. It originally was not. So whether it be trade or communication, it has spread from one region to another. And I mean, it's a great example of how diffusion works, and we can chart it out on this beautiful map. We also have the spread of cotton. So what we need to know right now is India. India is kind of the initial center for cotton. It's also going to start in like Egypt. Egypt's going to have a cotton industry, but we're not really there yet. For our purposes right now, we are talking about cotton coming out of India. It is one of its main exports because eventually, well, even now, people are using cotton for textiles and stuff that they're crafting in their homes. And eventually, this is going to grow and grow when we get to down the road a bit, the Industrial Revolution and textile mills popping up. So India has the cotton. That is their big commodity they have that people want and they can make some money off of. Now, there are certain states that participate more in trade and help further it. China is one of those. So we're going back a little bit to the Tang and Song dynasties that exist before the Mongol invasion. And they really get in on the sea trade. So one of the things is the Grand Canal, when that is built, you have all of these horizontal running rivers through China, which is great, but they're horizontal. So you have to go all the way out to the seas. But when they constructed the Grand Canal, all of a sudden you've connected all of them. And if you want to get down here to like Shanghai, you don't have to come out through the Yellow River into the sea and travel down the coast through the Yellow Sea to get to Shanghai. You can just get on the inlet of the Grand Canal and travel all the way down and get to your spot where all these trading cities and big names are popping up. So that's super helpful. And because of this, when more trading ports end up in the south for not land-based trade, but for sea-based trade, populations shift, and places like Nanjing and Shanghai become really populated because that's where the business is, that's where the money is, because they're getting into the Indian Ocean trade system that way. And then we've already talked about how they've invented junk ships to help better procure this trade system, and also they're the creators of the magnetic compass, which only gets tweaked and bettered over the course of time. Now, I would say one of the most notable impacts when we talk about China is going to be the impact of potentially just one man. So you have this Ming Admiral Zheng He, and he is among one of the world's greatest explorers that often no one hears about in the West. He's often overshadowed by people, like Magellan and Vasco da Gama and Columbus and all these others that we highlight, Marco Polo, right? All these Europeans that get the titles like these explorers who went further than anyone else. Zhang He is one of the most iconic explorers in history. So he is known as that first bullet. He undertook the largest and most impressive maritime expedition the world had ever seen at that point. And the whole thing was they're not looking to conquer land. Like, they're not even looking for a route to another place. Like when the Europeans start exploring, it is initially to find access to China to get access to the goods, right? And that's their driving force. And then eventually more exploration is to conquer and claim land for one's country. China's not doing that. China is going out there to sample what is around and to try to add people to their tribute system. They're not moving in, they're not absorbing empires or states, and they're not setting up shop for Chinese people to go and like migrate to and move to. They're enrolling people in a tribute system and seeing what is out there to be offered to them. So there's this huge fleet that's commissioned by this Emperor Yang Li, and it's 6 different expeditions that Zheng He goes on. It takes him 28 years to do all of them. And in this ship, or in this voyage, he's got like 300 ships the first time. And I'm going to show you at some point in here how large these ships are and how just mind-blowing they must have been. They're very cool. So Zheng He is also unique because number one, he's a eunuch, which we already have talked about, and how they're like considered a very like elite people. And the emperor carries it very close to his heart, right? Because they're extremely focused, they can't be distracted, they can be trusted with the emperor in his home. So that makes him a privileged position, but also he's going to be an explorer. He's also Islamic, though, like he's a Muslim. And while the Chinese government wants him to go enroll more states into the tribute system, Zheng He also has like a personal side goal to like help spread Islam throughout the world because he kind of finds it as like one of the things he should do. So it's like this double gold exploration. Get people to be a part of the tribute system, perform submission rituals to show that they pay reverence to China, and they'll give China cool stuff to say, here's our show of good faith, and China will give them back stuff to say, hey, thanks. So it was this idea of like, quote, bringing order to the world. So if you click here, I believe it does take you to another website. Yeah, talking about Zheng He's travels because he's an amazing guy. Okay, so this picture, while it's a weird little cartoon drawing, this ship in the front, that's Columbus's ship. So you guys know when you hear about like the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria was like his largest ship. That's it. That's Columbus's largest ship that he sailed across the Atlantic with. This is the largest of Zheng He's ships. So there are often people who talk about do you think Zheng He and China could have made it across the Pacific Ocean and landed on the west coast of America? But they weren't into colonization and claiming anything for China or moving people in. So maybe like they didn't find anyone to enroll in their tribute system, or they did and then they didn't write about it. Who knows? But the possibilities are there. If this tiny ship goes across, could this one potentially? It's another like what if in history. So here's how cool it looked kind of in other drawings with these massive sails. And they would have had different ones. They would have had scout ships to go out and look ahead because you didn't want to bring the treasure ship in unless you knew something was there. So these scout ships, and they had battleships, and then they had the treasure ship, which the sole purpose was to fill it up with as much stuff as possible from all these new regions that they were employing into the system, into the tribute system. We even have them bringing gifts like drafts and elephants and rhinos back as tribute, or just to show like, hey, look at what we found in these other places. Looks like a sculpture of Buddha, right? Like they're collecting all sorts of stuff. So of course the iconic draft is always one that people remember when they went to Africa, because they did make it over there. They were gifted a draft and they brought it back to Emperor Yongle, and he like kind of like he started his own zoo in China with these cool creatures that people in China had never seen because they're not native to that continent. And the idea that he was so proud of it, he had them do a painting. But this giraffe was put on that treasure ship and carted back. So when we look at where he went, you have the 6 main voyages, excuse me, and you also have his 7th one. But they're all kind of close to the same. You do have some, like the 4th voyage, that kind of tapers off here, and a couple others. But they're trying to go around and land in as many ports as possible to find new people. All right, this is a video I want you to go watch. It's super interesting, but at the end, they talk about how he is spreading Islam to people and how there's places still that have like statues of him built in, I believe it's like modern day Indonesian regions, because he was the one that brought Islam to them. And now they're like a predominantly Muslim population, and they owe like great reverence to Zhang and hold him in high regard to the point where, yeah, they have statues built. So please go watch this video. It does have a lot of worthwhile information that would be useful for your exam or essays and stuff. So when we also talk about Indian Ocean trade or just any of these trade systems, we've mentioned that Islam's super friendly to merchants because Muhammad was a merchant, right? And they're seen as like, not bottom of the barrel on the social class like in China. So Islamic merchants really were the main merchants we'd see on a lot of these trade routes, which means Islam was everywhere on these trade routes. And with them, they would sometimes set up communities. So Muslim merchants established communities of traders, these diasporic communities. They were on the move all the time, and they created these communities, and there started being like settlements within cities, or like kind of thing of like neighborhoods popping up that would have been for these merchants, and they would have stayed there for long periods of time in their travels. And it would have been, here's a neighborhood where all of these Islamic merchants gather and stay, and live for periods of time when they're on the road. And that meant there would have been like a hearth for their religion and ideology to grow, which means it would have influenced people around them. So it's super interesting for that reason. Now, we've talked about Srivijaya. We talked about it in Unit 1, but it's worth mentioning again here because they're iconic for Indian Ocean trade because they own Malacca and the Strait of Malacca. So there's lots of small little ports, and people tried to compete to call in the most traders, right? The most merchants. And so all these little city states, not city states, cities are fighting for notoriety, I suppose. And if you can get the most travelers to come to you, you're probably going to have a city that's worth a lot of money because a lot of people are stopping by. So Srivijaya was just the place to be, though. Like, location was everything. They were at the heart of anything. If you wanted to get from China to India, from India to China, from China to East Africa, you had to go through Srivijaya's empire, and they could charge you for use of their waterways. They levied these taxes, and also they had access to all these spices that grew there, or at least in their region. And so you had just a lot of reason to stop there. They had talked about how they had access to other places throughout the region, but they were kind of like the Walmart of their day. They had all of these big markets where you could get any spice from the region, right? But people like in China thought like, oh my God, they grow all this here. And Srivijaya was like, no, we don't. We get it from our neighbors down the way, but you don't need to know that. You come here because we're not going to tell you where you got it from, because then maybe you'll try to go there. No, you come to us for everything, and it makes them like a necessary stopping point along the way to pick up all your spices and other things. They're just like this mini global market within the Indian Ocean that everyone stops at. And if you want a shortcut, cut through it, you have to pay a tax. So, with this, they found that they had these religions that really stuck, right? So you had this idea that the rulers that were living in Southeast Asia were really attracted to the Indian belief systems. Things like reincarnation with like that Buddha, and even in Hinduism they have as well. but you also have a mixing of population. So, like, you do have Indian merchants coming down into this region, bringing their ideas. They're just like this global melting pot at the time. You're going to have Islamic merchants there, but you're also going to have people from India bringing Hinduism, but you're also going to have Buddhism being brought down as well throughout the region because of all the neighbors. So eventually Buddhism kind of comes out on top. Not saying that the other religions don't have place there too, but it becomes a Buddhist center. So then not only do you have merchants coming into trade, you have people there traveling just because it's like this iconic religious place for Buddhist monks. So now they're going there in like an attempt for like a religious journey and experience. So they have kind of a double-edged sword. You come here for trade, you can also come here for religious purposes if you are a Buddhist monk. So we can see a lot of their regions where, they created this architecture and you see depictions of Buddha, again, showing how important it clearly was. Now, Borobudur, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, so I apologize. They're an ally of Srivijaya, and we see again Hinduism and Buddhism temples being built here, or statues to reflect the gods or the important deities and stuff in these regions. And there's a place like in this region where you have syncretism blossoming again. So carved statues have Javanese features, so the island of Java is right there. And the scenes are set in the home country of Java, not India, but you have like Hindu representation there, right? So you have the blending of Java culture with these other religions that are not natural to the region. You also have them blending where like Shiva is worshipped, so we know Hinduism is there and it's impactful. Cows are honored, like in the Hindu religion. So again, you have a blending of this idea of Java traditional culture with Hindu religion. And then we have the Swahili City-States, this coast of Eastern Africa that becomes super important to trade. So it comes from modern day Somalia to Mozambique. And these are all people who were part of that Bantu migration a long time ago. They have the Bantu language that they all speak some kind of version of, but we know they originated from the same region up north. And you start seeing Islam have a very large impact. Um, it's the religion stimulated trade in the areas because Islamic merchants were going out, but Islam is already in northern Africa because of Dar al Islam. Mecca's not too far from them. So you already have Islamic merchants in the region, and this is just another spot for them. Things that are coming out of the Swahili city-states, a lot of the big ones that we need to think about are gold, ivory, slaves, and then we also have them getting salt from like the interior of Africa and bringing it to the coast as well, which we talk about more in trans-Saharan trade. So gold, ivory, and slaves are really what's coming off of this coast the most. Um, because of the importance of their participation in the trade system, you start having a merchant class develop for kind of the first time in some of these regions, at least on large scale. And cities began to form, urbanization occurred, but they're kind of like these Swahili city-states. Think of them like Greek city-states. Like Zanzibar is different than Kilwa. Um, all of them are run by their own kind of king or leader, but collectively they're all the Swahili city-states. They recognize that, but they're all independent. And so you can cruise down and, trade with each one. Now, we also have a lot of beautiful examples of syncretism in the Swahili city-states. So this lion, for example, it is found in one of the Swahili city-states, and it is an African lion, which, yes, that would be something native to Africa, but it is created in an Indian style. When Indian art depicts lions, it very much looks like this. But it's also made from Chinese copper coins melted down. So you have Chinese influence physically, artistically in Indian style, and then topic wise and location, you have it in Africa. So it's a really good example of showing how all of these cultures are interacting with each other in some way often. Okay, and this is probably the most iconic example of syncretism that you do need to note down. The Swahili language itself is syncretic. So people were speaking Bantu languages or dialects, right? And we had talked about that. So grammatically, Swahili fits into the Bantu root system of language. But when it's written, it looks very much like Arabic. So an Arabic script with Arabic loaned words. Swahili language is a solid blend of Bantu language and Arabic language, all fused together to create something wonderful and new, Swahili. So, a lot of people in this region clearly felt strong ties or had direct ties to whether it be Arab or Persian descendants, um, and ancestry. So it's not like they only view themselves as Bantu people or Africans. You do have a large population there who equate themselves with being from the Middle East. And this is partially due to so many settled merchants in this region living there, stationed in there, starting lives there. The monsoon winds act as this force to push somebody from the Indian Ocean trade and have to hang out in the Swahili city-states for months until the monsoon winds change. And while you're there, you're mingling with people. You're not holed up in your hotel or house. And you probably do build a house. If this is your job, this is what you do all year long. So you're going to come back here every year for months. So you probably do have a home. And you're going to make relationships with people, including women who you might marry and have children with and start these blended families, right, with different cultures. So Islam really finds a home here and starts to spread. And this is all because of herb traders. So this is why we call them diasporic communities. The Muslim population that was not native to the eastern coast of Africa, yeah, now they have a very large Muslim community population there. People moved there. They were not forcibly moved, but they moved from their home regions where they originated from and set up shop somewhere else and started their own communities. So again, this is not forced like we see other places that are experiencing this. Sorry, I'm pausing because my computer's about to die and I'm not going to start over because I would cry a million tears. So, with this, a minute here. There we go. With this, you also have, blendings of culture pretty permanently. We still have Islam being a very important dominant religion in Africa today. We also have in Kilwa, which is another one of the Swahili city-states, we have mosques that are built, which again, if you have a small population, you're not building these things there. There is a great following. Now, Great Zimbabwe is kind of down from the Swahili city-states a little, but it's very close, so it can participate in the trade. And we have things like gold and ivory coming from this region. We had talked about him before as this powerful trading city with these great big walls in their castle that was held together with no mortar, and it's just astonishing. But they are trading gold and ivory and getting rather rich off of it. They were kind of the go-between between the coast and the inland part of Africa. They were the middleman. They could get stuff from the interior because they were close to it, but they were also close to the Swahili city-states. So they were a really good go-between to have that flourish. Swahili city-states, people from there necessarily would not want to go all the way into the interior to get their goods, but a place like Great Zimbabwe, it wasn't that far, and they could make the journey or have some arrangement set up. So they become pretty wealthy because of it. All right. So when we talk about the impact of Islam in the Indian Ocean trade, this is what we mean. The fact that today in Southeast Asia, there is a large Muslim population, specifically in Indonesia, for example, that is all pretty much a direct result of what was started in the Indian Ocean trade system. The idea that something that happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago we can see directly impacting our world in this case 2020. So not much has changed since then. So if we have to sum it up, here you go. This is the trading network of this period. The Silk Road's important, but this one, more money, more people, more, I would say, I think you could argue, more cultural diffusion and long-term changes. This is the network that the Europeans want to reach. They don't care about the Silk Road. They don't want to walk across an entire continent to get to China. That would be insane. They want to figure out how to get here. And they would love it if they could figure out a waterway to get into this trading network, because then it would give them access to China, to India, and to all those islands where all those spices are coming from. It's the most peaceful exchange of goods that have taken place here in a millennia. It's peaceful. People aren't really fighting each other. Business just goes about as usual. It's gonna be a little bit before other countries enter and cause a disturbance. And so again, you need to remember, are luxury goods traded on this one? Yeah, to some extent. But the big thing is bulk items. They're rather selling timber and textiles because that's what more people want, more people call for it, people need more of it. And like, yeah, there is silk and porcelain kind of traded, but that's not the big one. That's a Silk Road thing. This is about mass produced or mainstream goods. And so all the big travelers in this period use the route. So we've mentioned Marco Polo. You're going to be reading about Ibn Battuta, and also he's in the Trans-Saharan trade. And then Zhang He, this is their route. They all use this one once they get access to it from whichever direction they're coming. All right, we're not going to practice. So hopefully that helps kind of settle what this is about. Let me know if you have any questions.